So hello and welcome to today's video. Today we're going to be going over the entire beta map of Bully. But we're going to be starting things off by going over the school grounds. In this video anyway, before making our way around the rest of Bullworth. So let's start off by going over the landmark of Bully itself, the Academy. So Bullworth Academy was originally much different, being a completely different building in general. Here it looks like the Academy's entrance would have been much different, lacking these stairs leading up to an elevated platform. Instead preferring a more flat approach. The roof also looks much smaller here too, nothing like the area where we fight Gary in Final Showdown. Something interesting I find here is a possible attic-like area going off this window at the very top. Also looking at the front, there is no infirmary to be found anywhere, and it doesn't show anywhere else on this building, so it's unknown where the infirmary was supposed to be originally. The back of the building I find is much more interesting. While it does slightly resemble the one we know of in the final game, we sure as hell do not have this walkway on either side, nor do we have 3 floors either. Also at the very bottom of the middle at least, there is not an area for Jimmy to climb up, nor is there any way for Jimmy to sort of get into the school's back. Actually, speaking of that, there's actually a massive oversight in the final game with this. So this is the back of Bullworth Academy, right? Yet when Jimmy enters, he ends up on the west side of the school. You don't have to be an expert in geography to realise that Jimmy should have ended up in Crabblesnitch's office or something. Anyway, back to it. So this design was likely changed very early on, since the final version of Bullworth Academy is very heavily based off Fettes College, which is located in Edinburgh, Scotland. It wouldn't surprise me if this was used for some very early builds before it was changed, since these are 3D models of course. I would likely assume these were in some of the very first editions of Bully. Likewise, you can still see concept artwork of Bullworth Academy at the library, which is interesting to say the least, as it shows us that this design was going to be strongly considered from the get-go. So Bullworth Academy itself, even in the final game, was supposed to have 3 floors initially. The only remains of this can be seen on the exterior of the Academy, which oddly has 3 floors of windows, but when you go inside, only 2 floors. But despite being deleted, there are quite a few remains that can be accessed through modding. For example, if you use a mod to enter the classrooms, and by the classrooms I mean the English classroom specifically in Exit, Jimmy will just fall into the art class below, which very heavily implies that English class was going to be on the 3rd floor, not the ground floor. Speaking of that, originally in the beta version of Welcome to Bullworth, or This Is Your School, Miss Danvers was going to give Jimmy a tour of the school and tell him what classes he would be attending, instead of Gary Smith showing Jimmy around the school, and she would actually point out a few classes that Jimmy would attend, and these are in completely different places to where they would be in the final version. Take a listen.
Most of your classes are going to be in this building. Art and photography is on the top floor. Your chemistry and biology classes are on this floor. You're in Mr. Galloway's English class, I believe. That's on this floor.
Also, the 3rd floor can be seen very slightly on some pre-release material, such as the first trailer and a promotional screenshot, so I would say this 3rd floor was likely a very late cut. I would assume probably early 2006, mid 2006, somewhere around that region I would assume. Now one thing I do find interesting is many of the classes are actually fully explorable and even have working collision, including doorways in and out of them too. So I wonder if Jimmy was able to enter and exit these classrooms whenever he wanted to. But to be honest, even modding your own way inside, it does cause a bit of trouble. Like when you want to leave, it kind of does play up a bit there. For example, art class has no way of exiting, you're kind of stuck in here. And chemistry will just instantly knock you out upon exit because for some reason it spawns you so far off the map. But yeah, it's still interesting nonetheless to think that at one point maybe we could have just entered and exited as many classrooms as we wanted to. So the school bathrooms originally had their own interiors as well, but likely merged with the school one because, let's face it, having 4 separate interiors for something as small as a bathroom makes absolutely no point whatsoever. So let's go all the way down to the basement now, because the basement is probably one of the strangest areas in the entire game because of how weirdly inconsistent it is with the rest of Bullworth Academy itself. So first off, when you enter, there's a massive garage door next to the door where Jimmy enters, which is very odd since the exterior has none of this really. This might imply the original exterior was completely different too, and we know this because of the sort of Bullworth Academy concept I showed at the beginning of this video, which even then didn't have any kind of slope leading down into the basement. Also, the stairway, we can see a silhouette of it. It looks completely different to the one Jimmy sort of went down because we can kind of make out railings, and to me it looks a little bit wider as well. Secondly, many people have always wondered about this really weird bed alongside the radio, since after this room the music just cuts out entirely. Well, this is because Mr. Lunt, the janitor, was actually going to be found down here after 7 PM when the school store closes. He was probably removed since Jimmy could just come down here and beat him up without any repercussions for it. Anyway, towards the end of the basement we have the hole, which is Russell's boss fight arena. We come here once and never use this area ever again. But originally the hole was going to be home to a Fight Club minigame, since there's an unused marker next to this ringside table and the code refers to this as a bookie. You know, somebody who takes bets. So it's assumed that Jimmy could either come down here and watch and bet on fights, or potentially partake in them himself. The only other remains of this are Christine Martin saying, "Did you hear there's fresh blood on the floor of the hole?" And for some really odd reason, located just above the table there's a completely solid platform, which I've had to assume would be where some audience members would be standing to watch over the fights. Also near the hole there's a really weird and yet somewhat creepy crashed elevator. Well, initially that elevator was going to take you up to the rooftop. Apparently it would appear repaired later on during the story, you know, like how some various in-game barriers get removed or destroyed for some completely unexplained reason as you naturally progress. So onto the janitor's room now, and I don't mean the basement, but actually the door on the second floor, which is marked janitor. Now this room is never opened at all. No pedestrians will ever run in here if they're scared. It's almost like this room just doesn't exist. And for a good reason, because no clipping inside reveals a very empty room. There is nothing in here at all except a really weird buzzing noise, and this room is also extremely incomplete, since you can actually shoot out these walls which have no collision. Also, since nobody ever comes in here, you can basically shoot out prefects at will, and yeah, they'll just keep running into the wall and can never grab you. So on to Dr. Crabblesnitch's office, and despite being used for cutscenes only, it was going to be enterable at one point, since the interior itself is actually pretty rock solid and was going to be used for the mission The Paddle, where Jimmy would break into Crabblesnitch's office and steal his paddle, and plant it on Damon West. For some very odd reason there's a door that actually has no collision which can be entered, which going off the collision from here looks like a possible cupboard like area, which I would assume is where Jimmy would grab the paddle from. The reception area where Miss Danvers can be found was originally part of this interior too, going off the radar of course, which I think looks a bit bigger than it does in the final game. There's also a promotional screenshot of her with the doors to the office very clearly opened. I'm not sure if this was going to be attached to the main school interior, or if the reception area was going to be attached to Crabblesnitch's office initially. Anyway, the rooftop where you fight Gary Smith was going to be explorable in free mode, as the door used to access the roof can be modded to be open at any time. And this roof access room was going to be used in Final Showdown, where originally Jimmy would chase Gary all across the school before running to the roof. However, if you go through this door, the roof itself will not be opened, because the roof itself is never loaded in free mode whatsoever. Rockstar themselves specifically coded for the rooftop to be in Final Showdown only. But it was considered at one point, but likely removed because of how very little there is to do up here anyway. And if you do use mods to enable the rooftop in free mode, Jimmy might get stuck in the area where you fight Gary. So I would assume that if this was enabled, this part would be blocked off or something. The only parts of the roof that are available 24/7 are just some random floating planks of wood, which can be walked on, and that's it really. So going back into the academy now, the cafeteria was originally going to be a completely separate interior instead of being connected to the main academy, which is weird since the auditorium and Crabblesnitch's office may have also been planned to be a part of the academy too. But yeah, speaking of the auditorium, the one that's used for the candidate nutcracking is fully enterable and completely solid, almost like you were allowed to explore here at one point. Well, except the top part, which has no collision for the railing, but interestingly has a possible radar for the deleted infirmary, if you go to the east side. So with the infirmary, the only known prop is a very incomplete model by the name of Med Cabby, which if viewed is just a bright pink medicine cabinet, which is supposed to say void instead of vouv because it's using a placeholder texture and mirrored textures of course. There may have also been a deleted minigame that took place here where Jimmy helped out Nurse McRae by giving injections to students, as it's audio files for some NPCs like Thad, Cornelius and Tom, with them screaming in pain, while Jimmy casually gloats saying stuff like "take it like a man," "sorry doctor's orders" and "relax, it'll hurt a bit." Probably dropped because it just seems a bit too weird and a bit cruel for Bully. But to be honest, it kinda reminds me of that Ed, Edd n Eddy episode where Kevin is scared of needles, and yeah, I reckon it would be something like that, but here's the audio files anyway.
Miss McRae sends her love. Like a shot in the arm, isn't it? Sorry, doctor's orders. Now you know what real pain feels like. Ow, 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 ow! Ow! Oh! 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 Ow!
The only other two remains of this are the radar, which as said can be seen in the auditorium, and the exit graphics, which actually do show the beta boys dorm with 2 floors. So, you know where we're going now? The boys dorm. Because yes, it did have 2 floors, and there are quite a lot of remains of this. One being actually the unused infirmary door exterior, which I just showed. One being the special edition comic, which has a rendition of the dorm with 2 floors. Another 3D model by David Byrne, and of course, a crap ton of unused in-game files. So let's go over some cut features before the map changes, because first of all, the dorm would actually lock its doors after curfew, meaning Jimmy would have to break into the dorm by the back, by going through a window or the side, or just, you know, wait till 2 AM and pass out. Secondly, all kinds of students would spawn in here, including various cliques and little kids. Now this can still be kind of seen if Jimmy pulls the fire alarm, because in the boys dorm itself only non-cliques, nerds and bullies will be seen, but the second you pull that fire alarm, jocks, preps and greasers will also appear out the woodwork. Now little kids never spawn in the dorm whatsoever, but they may have done at some point, as there's unused models for Pedro and Sheldon in their pyjamas. Also in the boys dorm, if you actually do sort of no-clip your way into any other room, Jimmy will sort of teleport back to his own room for some reason. But if we use a free cam, we can kind of look inside. We can see that Jimmy was never ever meant to enter here whatsoever. I would assume that these were done because, you know, it kind of gives the boys reason to spawn in, but I don't see why they couldn't have just handled it like the girls dorm, but yeah. Another big change is Authority would have also been able to spawn in the boys dorm too, as shown by a promotional screenshot of Mr. Burton in the boys dorm. Now, I think this was likely removed because safe houses in Rockstar's games are typically, well, safe to be in, you know, and if you're going to have Authority figures in there, it just kind of ruins the fun. There may have also been a darts minigame that took place here as well. So, let's go over to the map changes now, because we have a hell of a lot of these to go over. So first of all, the dorm never had a lounge area, as seen by some promotional screenshots, once again the one at Mr. Burton. Now this one is actually massive because it could mean one or two things. Either the lounge area was going to be somewhere else, possibly on the second floor, or there was no lounge at all and most dorm scenes had to be reshot. Also, if you look at the picture of Mr. Burton again, the stairway to the second floor was going to be where a tag is located in the final version. Now no clipping up reveals the second radar still exists and we get a good idea of the outline of the dorm. Jimmy's bedroom was originally situated at the far back of the dorm, and we know this because there's an unused audio file from Welcome to Bullworth featuring an earlier voice actor for Jimmy, and Pete tells him that he'll wait downstairs. Likewise, if you actually pay attention to some of the final Chapter 1 cutscenes, they do end really weirdly. Like the cutscene to Halloween ends with Jimmy and Gary walking through a wall on the opposite side of Jimmy's bed. So that to me says quite a few of these cutscenes were never reshot and just sort of used anyway.
You guys want to give me some time to settle in and get unpacked? You're not too interested in yourself, friend. Dude can't stand you already. Jimmy, but if you want to hang out, we'll be in the dorm downstairs.
Also interestingly, on the outside, on the top of the dorm, if you no-clip in a very specific place, you'll trigger an unused entrance onto the second floor. But since this doesn't exist, you'll just be floating randomly. It's assumed that this was either an entrance to an attic or the bathroom. Probably the bathroom, since if you move forward you'll see Jimmy's reflection pop up in a really kind of creepy way. So to end this part, let's go on to the girls' dorm, and to be honest there are not many changes here at all, but weirdly it seems pretty complete for what it's worth. So one minor change is the door on the side. It's a one-way door, but this was supposed to be a two-way door initially and can be fixed by modding. And the other weird change is in the girls' dorm, there's a room on the top floor which cannot be opened at all. And if you no-clip, there is nothing behind here, but I think there was going to be a room here given the fact that every other room in the girls' dorm is opened by default. So that concludes this part of the beta bully map. I hope you enjoyed this video, thank you for watching and have a great day.